Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much indeed for inviting me. Hans, I have to say, I hear about this man so much over in Ireland, and I'm very envious of the amount of work that's actually been going on in Iceland. And I'm so delighted to actually be here and have an opportunity to talk to you about the background to a lot of this work. But before I do that, I can just tell you that my father was stationed here during the war in the Royal Navy, and he always talked very highly. And there was a particular drink he always used to drink here, which I can't remember the name of, but he said it was very intoxicating. And the second thing is thank you for your volcano, because I was stuck in Barcelona when the volcano erupted the last time, and I was only supposed to be there for 2 days. And I ended up being in a beautiful hotel. It was a 5-star hotel, and I was stuck there for 2 weeks. And they kept saying to me, "Don't worry, we'll get you out. We'll send a car, and we'll get you out. Don't worry." And I said, "It's fine. Don't worry." You know. But because they thought I was going to get out very soon, I didn't buy any clothes. So I just washed my clothes in the sink in this 5-star hotel now, and it had a little balcony outside. And I hung my clothes out on the balcony in the beautiful sunshine of Barcelona. And after a week, the manager of the hotel, of the 5-star hotel, came up to see me. And he said, "Dr. Banks," he said, in perfect English, he said, "we can live with your socks on the balcony, but could you please take your underpants down?" Yeah. Which I did. So thank you. I got 2 weeks because of your volcano. This is about the invisible man. This is the invisible man's use of primary care services. And actually, it doesn't really matter whether we're in Iceland or whether we're in Estonia or whether we're in Russia or whether we're in Ireland. It really doesn't matter, because actually the men are invisible most of the time when it comes to primary care. And I'm going to explain this in a moment. But first of all, does anybody recognize what's happening in this picture? Does anybody recognize this picture? Anybody recognize this thing here and this here? No? Well, this is the sun, obviously, okay? My eldest daughter's an astronomer, you see, so she gives me these slides. And Dad, try and make a story around these slides. And this is Venus. Women come from Venus, isn't that right? Well, here's Venus moving across the surface of the sun. And this happens about once every few hundreds and hundreds of years, okay? And has been going on for countless millions and millions of years that Venus has moved across the surface of the sun. And Stone Age people looked up and saw this. We never thought anything of it. And then in the 1700s, they sent a ship with a telescope and a clock into the southern hemisphere to time Venus moving across the sun. And back in Greenwich, in London, they had the same clock and the same telescope, and they measured the time in the northern hemisphere for Venus to move across the surface of the sun. And when they brought that clock back all the way from the southern hemisphere in a sailing ship, and they looked at the two clocks, they were different. If you measure the time of Venus moving across the front of the sun in the southern hemisphere, it is different from the northern hemisphere. And because of that simple fact, they could triangulate. They could work out for the first time the distance from the Earth to Venus, from the Earth to the sun, from the Earth to all the known members of the solar system known at that time in the 1700s, because somebody noticed a difference. And that's what this story is all about. It's noticing a difference and then acting upon it. So all of what you're going to see today is all about people who notice a difference, notice something that's happening, and acting upon it. And that's what this story is all about. Let's just see if we can get this on. Now, this is not about women and men against each other. This is not a them and us argument. This is women and men working together to improve the health of both sexes and children. I will not accept any form of attacks on women, or for that matter, attacks on men from either side, okay? This is women and men working together. But there's a lot of stereotypical ideas about women and men, about women being able to multitask and men having trouble even switching on the radio while driving in case everything falls to pieces, especially if the kids start shouting in the back and whacking them at the same time as listening to the radio, as trying to turn right. It's very difficult. But for women seem to do this. They may drive on the wrong side of the road, but it doesn't matter. They can manage to do these things. That's the stereotypical view of women and men. And I don't care whether it's true or not. I don't care. But there is recent evidence. This is recent evidence to show that in men, the neural pathways move from the front of the brain to the back, inside their hemispheres. Look, do you see the way they're running backwards and forwards? Look. Whereas in women, they go side to side. They use both hemispheres. It's like a dolphin. Dolphins can swim and sleep at the same time. Okay? So this, they say, it shows that women multitask, can do lots of things at once, whereas men tend to focus in on single things and focus on them. Now, I don't care whether that's true or not. I really don't care. And if you ask these really clever psychiatrists and philosophers and researchers, what is it to be a man? They'll give you about 10 different explanations of what it is to be a man. I don't care. This is what I care about, is this. Now, I make no apology for having to use stuff from the United Kingdom or from Ireland, where I practice as a doctor in Ireland. But we are a pan-European organisation. But this is stuff from the United Kingdom. This is what I care about. I care about the fact, if you look at the deaths before 75, young men, if you look at the deaths before that, 60% of those deaths are in men and 40% are in women. In other words, men are dying earlier, 60 to 40. This is what I care about. When you now look at the deaths that happen between men and women, which are avoidable, the avoidable deaths we're talking about now, it is the same number. It is again 60 to 40. In other words, we don't have to accept this. There's something here that's happening which is making this so. And if it's something that's making it so, then we can make it not so. In other words, we do not have to be fatalistic about men's health. We can change these things because this is avoidable. And that's the whole point of the talk and the whole point of the work that Johannes is doing as well. Now, this is what I'm worried about. There are more women than men diagnosed with common mental conditions. We know that. But when you actually look at what happens between men, most of the suicides are amongst men. And most of those suicides are in low-income group men. Suicide in upper-income group men is really quite rare compared to suicides in low-income group men. Of the adults who go missing, 73% of them are men. And so it goes on. 90% of rough sleepers, the people who sleep out homeless in the streets, are men. And so it goes on. In other words, there's something happening about men. Even though women are being diagnosed more with mental health problems, you can see the impact of this mental health issue when it comes to men. This is what I care about. This is the survival of cancer right across Europe. Look, these are all the countries right across Europe before the accession countries. And you can see the massive difference between Sweden, the survival here of women and men, well, men compared to women here, okay, and the survival over here for Slovenia. Look at the difference in survival. Now, this is what I was alluding to earlier on. Here is a difference. Here is something which we need to take note of. Every country in the world, women live longer than do men. There's only one country that doesn't, that's Slovenia. Somalia. That's because of complicated childbirth. Now, there are three basic reasons why that could be so. The first reason is that we are genetically programmed as men to just die early. Like some kind of Mission Impossible tape. You will drop dead at the age of 55 if you accept this mission to be a man, kind of thing. So a man's got to do what a man's got to do, and that's drop dead early, you see. So maybe that's it. It's genetic. We can't do anything about it. It's genetic. So we may as well just give up now and just go home, okay, because there's nothing we can do about it. And the second explanation for this, or these three explanations, is that maybe it's the environment in which the man finds himself. If he's a low-income group man, if there's his ethnic isolation, if he's gay, for instance, much higher suicide amongst gay men. But also maybe it's the way that men are using the health services, which also impacts on it. So there's the second possible reason. But then there's the third reason, which is the most obvious reason, and of course the most attractive reason, and why women live longer than men, and that is because women kill men. Now, attractive as this theory is, it's not true. And we know it's not true because married men live longer than unmarried men, but unmarried women live longer than married women. So if anything, men make women ill. So my wife believes in this theory implicitly. So that could be it. But the point is this. If it was just genetic, and I agree that there is a genetic component. There is a genetic component to this. But if it was only genetic, you would expect the ratio of survival to be the same across all the countries. The absolute numbers would change, but the ratio between women and men's survival would be the same. And that would be true right across for the heart disease, for suicide, for all of them. You would expect to see the same ratio between women and men if it was just genetic. And it isn't. In all of the medical conditions, we see a change in whichever country they happen to live in, whether they're high income, whether they're low income. We see all these changes all the time. And because we see those changes, those differences, it means we can do something about it. That's the point of this slide. It's not that it's a terrible, terrible situation. What it tells us is that there's something happening here over which we have got some control and we can do something about it. And I find that very exciting that we can do something about these things. And so therefore, like certain people around us, we are doing something about it. And that's what's so exciting. Now, men are less likely than women to see a GP, attend for a health check, opt for bowel cancer screening, visit a pharmacy, have a dental checkup, have an eye checkup. What's the common factor here? Is primary care. The men are not using primary care nearly as well as we could do, and certainly not as well as women do on average. And we have to ask ourselves why. This is the use of general practice here, and this again is the UK, sorry. This is women here, and this blip here for women is antenatal care, okay? If you take that out, here it is here. This is women here, and it meets men about here, about 65-ish, my age here, 70, 65, there-ish, okay? Starts to come together. Down here, men make very little use of general practice, okay? Now, why is it that men start to see the doctor around about the age of 65 to 75? And the answer to the question is a riddle, okay? Do you know what the definition of male middle age is? Does anybody know what the definition of male middle age is? No? It's when your prostate's bigger than your brain. That is the definition of male middle age, okay? It's the only part of the male body, unfortunately, which gets bigger as you get older. Everything else gets smaller. Your hair gets smaller, everything gets smaller, including your bones get smaller. except for your prostate. Your prostate gets bigger as you get older. And what happens about here is, because it gets so big, you can't go to the toilet properly. So you get up in the middle of the night and have to go to the toilet 3, 4, 5 times. And your wife starts to get a little bit pissed off with this and goes down to the doctor and says, "Can I have some sleeping tablets, please?" And if that GP doesn't ask her why after all these years she now needs sleeping tablets, he will miss the fact that she's not sleeping because you, is getting up every night 3, 4, 5 times in the middle of the night and waking her up. And because, of course, us men are very considerate towards women, we don't put the light on as you go to the toilet. So we stub our toe as you're going round the corner of the bed. And then we go into the toilet, and then we don't realise, because we don't put the light on, that the lid of the toilet is still down when we use the toilet. And then we come back out again and stub out the other toe and get into bed, and then we snore. And she's reading her Reader's Digest or her Mills and Boon for the 100th time while you go off to sleep until the next time you get up and do it all over again and wake her up again. And she goes to the doctor and asks for sleep tablets. And if the doctor doesn't realise what's going on, he won't realise, or she won't realise, that what she needs is a TERP. She needs her prostate sorted out. That's what she needs to be able to get to sleep. In other words, your prostate, because you're the one who keeps waking her up. And that's why these guys are going to see the doctor here. Now, why are we not going down here? This is the question. Right, let's have a look at this. This was in the Daily Mail. It's a very right-wing newspaper in England. Here we are. But anyway, I read it on the news on the airplane. It's free. But it's not a stiff upper lip that stops me going to my GP. It's the sheer terror of what he might tell me. Now, this is where we get into PSA testing and checking for things. When the UK government decided they wanted to test people for bowel cancer, they asked us in the Men's Health Forum, would it be a good idea to check for barriers first? In other words, what would stop people from taking part in the bowel cancer screening program? Now, you know what the bowel cancer screening program is. You take a little bit of feces, you put it in a tube, and you send it off. Okay? It's not everybody's idea of a good day out, but nonetheless, it's not that difficult either. But they asked women and they asked men what would stop them from actually taking part in this program. And the women said that it was because what? What do you think the women said? 99%.
No idea.
No, they didn't say that. They didn't say that. They said embarrassment. They said it was the embarrassment of the process. I mean, it is. You have to sniff your fingernails after you've done it. I mean, but it's not that. No, it was embarrassment. For men, what do you think it was for men?
Afraid of the result.
It was the fear of the diagnosis. In other words, the male brain was saying, if you don't ask about it, you're not going to get it. The quickest way of getting cancer is ask about it. As soon as you ask about it, you get it. If you don't ask about it, you don't get it. And it's that simple. So it's like checking the car. You know, if you check the tyres, there's going to be something wrong with them. You know, so this is what this was all about. It was the fear. Now, tell me this: how can you design propaganda to get people to actually take part in the bowel cancer screening program when 50% of the people are saying it's because of embarrassment they won't take part, and the other 50% are saying because they're scared of the diagnosis? You can't. You've got to target the groups separately and give them the kind of information which will engage with them so that then they will take part in the program. And that's what they did. And that is why the program is working now better than it first did. This is the problem. Are we leaving it a bit too late to actually go to see the doctor? That's the question. It's not just are we going often enough to see the doctor. Are we leaving it too late? Are we waiting until we're 80 before we get a PSA test done to get checked out? Should we have done that PSA test at the age of 45 or 50? And then we could have checked it further on. Maybe this is what part of the problem is. But it's not just general practice. This is pharmacy. Men will use the pharmacy on average, this is right across Europe by the way, 4 times a year. Women, it's closer to 18 times a year. And when we ask men, why do they not use the pharmacy? They say things like, because there's nothing in there for men. And when we ask pharmacists, why have you got nothing in the shop for men? They say, because no men come in. It's a wonderful, vicious circle. It's going to go on forever. And one guy actually said, it was like as if the place was full of lipsticks and no spanners. I mean, fair enough, when you go into a pharmacy, it doesn't smell of diesel, does it? You know, when you go in, it's nifty, you don't see socket sets, you know, the spanners, you know. It's a very feminine environment. And yet, look at this. If you produce a service, this was one that they set up in the UK, it was a medicine service. It was advising people about new medicines. Half of the people who accessed this service in the pharmacy were men. So we don't have to accept this myth that men aren't interested, that men don't care. It's a myth. Men express themselves differently. Men do things differently. But they care passionately about things like health, things like relationships, and the impact their health has on the people who love them. And there is a myth out there that basically we don't care. It is not true. And there's so much evidence now out there to say that it isn't true. And this is for eye services. And this was even when they made the eye service free in Scotland. Scotland is a country near England. Whoa, you said that. If I'd said that up in Scotland now, I'd have been dead if I'd said that up in Scotland. You know, following the referendum when they decided not to break up eye. Here we go. Look at it. It made no difference. In fact, it got worse when they made it free to get an eye test done. The gap got greater. So it's not just money that's putting these guys off. And it doesn't matter where in the world you are. This was Australia. And it's the same in Australia. And it's the same in Estonia. And it's the same in Russia. And wherever you go, it's the same. But it's not just that men don't care. There are other issues. And that's what we've got to look at if we're going to actually address it. Things like prostate cancer. We've got to understand what it is in terms of the way the services are being delivered, the way that men access those services. When we understand those things, then we can get there much quicker and get a diagnosis much quicker. But even with diabetes, you can see here, middle-aged men are twice as likely to have diabetes as women. Imagine that. Twice as likely to have diabetes than women. Men, however, are twice as likely not to know they've got diabetes. The average delay in Europe for a woman to be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes is 1 year. Can anybody guess what the average delay for the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes is in men across Europe? A guess, please. Anybody? It's 1 year in women. It's 10 years. Somebody say that. 10 years in men is the delay. And if the delay is 10 years, on average now, average 10 years, then that means that the kidneys are shot, the arteries in the legs are shot, and the eyes are shot. So here's the next question. Diabetes in women in Europe is most diagnosed by GPs. Okay? Who in the community most diagnoses diabetes in men in the community? Anybody want to guess? Did you say opticians? Opticians diagnose diabetes mostly because when they look in their eyes, they see retinopathy. And if you've got retinopathy, you've had diabetes for at least 8 years. Now that's got to tell us something about the way that we're using services. And this is important to us with prostate cancer. It's part of the story of why it is that we're using these services the way they are. And here's where it really starts to kick in with cancer. This is men's awareness of the symptoms of cancer. Okay? The things that make you go, I wonder could this be cancer? Okay? Those kind of symptoms, all right? And there is only one symptom where it's the same for men as it is for women. Difficulty swallowing. All the rest, women have a bigger insight into the symptoms of cancer than do men. Is it any surprise? Open a newspaper and open a women's magazine. Open books for women and see how much material is out there for women about cancer. Well, you can hardly move as a woman without picking up information about cancer in some form, particularly breast cancer. It's more so now even ovarian cancer, cervical cancer. The information is almost massive, probably is massive for women. But there's not as much for men, and a great deal of it is poor. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But it's not just the problem of recognizing the symptoms. It's whether or not we act upon those symptoms as well. Does recognizing the symptom make us go and see the doctor? That's the next question. Because this, and I do apologize about this slide, but it's brand new. This has literally just come out. It's a report from Fukushima in Japan, where the nuclear power station exploded. It's a report to say what happened. And here it is. Compared to mothers, I'll read it out slowly, okay? You don't have to read it. Compared to mothers, fathers in general expressed less concern about radiation. Fathers prioritize their responsibilities as the breadwinner for the family. And radiation risk is a threat to economic stability and masculine identity. The fears and concerns of the mothers were dismissed, so the men could carry on working. And this is inherent, I think, when we look at the way the pattern of way men continue working even when they're ill. They continue working. And this is part of something, I think, which we almost breed into men, the way we bring men up. It's not that we're stupid. It's not that we're ignorant. We are brought up very often to take risks with our health, to take risks in lots of ways. But think about it this way. Society cannot have it both ways. If this hotel went on fire now, you would be quite pleased if a fireman rushed in, risking his life to come in and save us all in this room. In other words, we allow risk and value it on the one hand, and then we criticize young men for taking risks in the first place. And we can't have it both ways. So we have to look at the way we're educating young men to become men about risk and how to balance that risk. And here's an example here, I think it's a very good example. So we formed a round table, starting in Brussels and moving right across Europe, and we'd love to do one in Iceland as well, where you get all the heads of primary care. Every one of these is the top person in primary care in Europe. Every one of them. And when they came into the room, I said to them, leave your egos outside the door. It was like Band-Aid. Leave your egos outside the door, because in this room, all of you here are equal. Because one of the problems we've got is that this pharmacist doesn't talk to this GP, and this GP doesn't talk to this optician. The crossover, the pickup, the speed at which we could diagnose things and have them treated better is delayed because of professional pride, that doctors not speaking to pharmacists and pharmacists not speaking to dentists, and so it goes on. We could work far better if we worked as a team
and picked things up faster and sent people into the right person who could actually do the treatment. So when somebody comes into the pharmacist and complains about going to the toilet and having a problem passing water and having a bit of blood in the urine, that's not good enough to just give them an aspirin, so to speak. That man has to be checked, and he has to be checked by somebody who knows what they're doing. That's what these round tables are all about. And this is the result. Now we've done them in 4 countries so far. And it's working. We're finding out what are the barriers to the way men are using these services. Love to do it in Iceland. And this, incidentally, this is an online site here, a research site, where men can ask any question they want about the prostate. And we analyse the questions that they're asking. We find out, have they already seen a doctor, for instance? How long did it take them to see a doctor? They're very often in the questions, they're very honest, these men. It's anonymous. It's very honest in there. And then we have a look at it. And the most important thing that comes out from the questions is not, how long am I going to live? The most important question is, how can I be normal? Not Superman. How can I be a Superman? How can I just be normal? How can I just go to work like any other man? How can I have a normal relationship with my partner like any other man? Kind of thing. That's the questions they ask. Not super questions. Things that are basic questions. That's what they want to know. And that's important. Now we're coming to the end here. There's another astronomer's one, okay? Right, this is now Mars, Earth over here, right? There's Earth, there's the sun. And this was in 1999. And the Americans sent a spaceship to Mars. And the idea was it was going to go round and round Mars, sample the atmosphere, and see whether there was any life, or had been any life, on Mars, okay? I mean, you could do the same thing in Stormont, which is the parliament in Northern Ireland where I practice it, for intelligent life. But you wouldn't find very bloody much, I can tell you. But you could do the same thing there. But here, they wanted to see what was in the atmosphere. So the little rocket set up here, and just here, had to fire its retro rockets to slow down so that it could just go into orbit. If it went too fast, it would shoot off. If it went too slow, it would slap right into Mars. So they had to send a signal that said, fire your retro rockets, and then it went into orbit. The problem was, down here on Earth, they were working in the metric units, they were working in meters and in kilograms, while the little spaceship, it had been programmed in the imperial system, which is still used in America, and for that matter in the UK to some extent, pounds and miles. So when they sent the signal from Earth to the little spaceship, it didn't have a clue what they were talking about and just smacked straight into Mars. It cost $624 million to find out the difference between the imperial units of measurement and the metric system of measurement. I could have done it for them for nothing. 2.5 centimeters equals an inch. I could have done it for them for nothing. They sent a spaceship all the way to Mars to find out the answer to that question. Cost them a fortune. The point being this: if you give people information upon which they cannot act, then do not be surprised if the outcome is worse rather than not even just the same. Because if you give people information which frustrates them and which makes them unable to act upon that information, then the outcome is always worse than not doing anything at all. And that is the key to men's health, because that's what we've been doing all these years, is giving men information upon which they can't act. You mustn't smoke. You mustn't drink. You're fat. Don't be so fat. Get your teeth pulled out. All things that they can't do for whatever reason, and then we blame the men. We say it's your fault because you're fat, you're lazy, and you've got a prostate. It's all your fault, mate. You deserve everything that's coming to you. Right? That's the way we've been doing it. We've just been blaming the men, instead of actually looking to what's around it. This is an actual poster from the British Department of Education to address adult illiteracy, right? I'm serious. And they wondered why nobody phoned in to find out what to do. And that's what we're up against in men's health. We just assume that men know about health. And it's a very poor assumption. Not because we're stupid, but because the information is not given to us in a way in which we can act upon it. So we produce things like this, these manuals. You've seen these things. Whoops, sorry. Seen these things, look. They look like Hayden's manuals. These are car manuals that you fix cars with. They are quintessentially for men. Women don't like them, don't find them attractive, but men find them very attractive because they're based on the way that we think. And that is, if it ain't, that idea of it ain't broke, don't fix it. So they go to the bit which is broke and find out how to fix it. If there's nothing wrong with the exhaust, don't look it up. If there's something wrong with the carburetor, look it up. That's the philosophy behind these things. And so it means you can get there faster. This is the kind of information which is working with men now. You know, why is it so important? Just coming to the end now. Why is it so important? You've seen this population curve. This is the same across the developed nations, where you have this huge number of men in the older age compared to younger men coming up. I was at a meeting in Poland, and speaker after speaker, it was on aging, speaker after speaker, including Lech Wałęsa, who was there. I thought he was dead, actually. He looked as though he should be dead, but he's still alive, Lech Wałęsa. He's there, president. And speaker after speaker said, the problem is there are too many old people in society. And when it was my turn to speak, I said, everybody said, the problem is there's too many old people. And I said, try saying this. Try saying the problem is there are too many black people in society. See how that sounds. You know, try that. Try saying there's too many Jewish people in society. See how that sounds, you know. And I nearly said, the problem is there's too many Irish people. I thought, shit, that's probably true, you know. But the point being is, why are people allowed to say that? Why are people allowed to say that the problem is that there's too many old people? Well, let me tell you something. I went blind. I'm an A&E doctor. I'm a trauma doctor. In Belfast, imagine. Right? We really needed trauma doctors. And I went blind. And society cut a hole in my eyes and transplanted new corneas, okay? And I could see again. And then I went deaf. Look, I answered the name of Lucky, okay? I went deaf, look. And society drilled a hole in my head and put this machine in, and then I could hear again. That meant I could carry on working in a job where we desperately needed people. Society didn't say the problem is there's too many old people. They said, let's invest in an older person here. And I repaid that investment in me 10, 100, 1,000 times. And we should be doing the same for all of our old people, whether they're postmen, nurses, teachers, whatever. We should be looking after our older people. And part of this is recognizing the impact of prostate problems, BPH and prostate cancer, especially prostate cancer. And not to just simply say, it's a throwaway issue. In the UK, until 12 years ago, they spent £45,000 in total on the research into prostate cancer. £45,000. It wouldn't buy you a bus, £45,000. And that's how much was spent on prostate cancer for men. Now bear this in mind, because we've got to invest, because of this, in our older men. And this is why. In every country in Europe, they're increasing the retirement age. And what I said in Poland stands everywhere. if you wish to lift the retirement age so that men and women can carry on working until older age, you are going to have to invest in their health. You are going to have to diagnose prostate cancer and treat it better than you are now, because these men are going to be expected to work longer, if what the government say is true. And such is the element of this. This is BT, British Telecom, BT. They actually set up, way back 23 to 08, a programme of looking after men with cancer so they could stay at work. And look at the impact. Look at the number of men who actually stayed on at work, even though they had the prostate cancer. And now with the new treatments for prostate cancer, the abiraterones and so on, the lifespan is extended and the quality of life is extended. So this becomes even more true in these youths. And finally, this is a view from my house. Okay, this is Northern Ireland, and over here is Belfast. Okay, and you're over there somewhere. That's Iceland is way over there, and here this is Belfast here. We're looking out across here. Okay, now is my daughter, my youngest daughter, who dragged me out to see this. Look, do you see that? That's a whirlwind. Now, we don't see that very often in Ireland. You know, we see some really, really strange and weird things in Northern Ireland. We call them politicians. But look at this. Look, they are weird. Look at this. That's a whirlwind. This thing came across. It took the top off my chicken hutch, and we were eating scrambled eggs, and for that matter, scrambled chickens, for quite some time after this thing went through. Okay? But to get a whirlwind, you need a perfect combination of wind speed, of air moisture, of temperature. It has to be just right, and then you get a whirlwind. And I put it to you, if we carry on treating our old people the way we are, as some kind of disposable item, if we do not invest in our older people, we will inherit this whirlwind. And that's where this man comes in terms of looking after men with prostate cancer. So, as my final slide, could it be this? Could it be just that we're so stubborn, that's why we die early? Or is it because the system is not recognizing the value of older men when it comes to things like prostate cancer? And here's me and your hands here, jumping for joy here, because you guys all turned up for this meeting, and I'm so delighted to be here. Now, I have to tell you, there's been a bit of airbrushing going on here, see? But it's only in my case, not in Johanna's case. Thank you very much.